Hey Pia, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Really excited to catch up, and I know we've been discussing this for a while, so we're finally here.
Yes, thank
Uh,
you so much.
we're doing this in person, right? But obviously the situation has kind of evolved, and we're making the best of technology. So thank you again for being flexible.
Thanks, awesome.
So look, I want to go back through, you've got an interesting background, and I think we can cover quite a few different topics that are going to be relevant to our audience. I always like to start, though, with life before Salesforce. And I think we can touch on a few different things because you've worked in different countries as well. So what was life like before moving to Australia and working, and also before Salesforce?
Yeah, so I think I have a very typical journey. If I compare myself to many Salesforce professionals, so many of us actually found ourselves accidentally ending up to Salesforce ecosystem, and that happened to me as well. So I was actually doing my PhD in London at the time. I was on a scholarship from Finland, and I was living in London, and I was doing my research. And then obviously slowly it started to occur to me that it's very unlikely I'm returning to my home country, Finland, anytime soon. And I started to think that maybe it would be good for me to start building more of a local career. And I started applying for jobs, and obviously it wasn't a good situation. It was just the aftermath of the global financial crisis. London wasn't what it used to be, so jobs were quite tough to get, especially as a young person. And I applied lots of jobs, and I was just very lucky to get a job in an organization that was implementing Salesforce at the time, and I was put in to coordinate that implementation with the consultants. And that's how I sort of ended up into the Salesforce space, and they sent me to trainings, and I fell in love with the platform. And that's how I got into that. And then after that period, I was offered a job in a consulting house, and that's how my career sort of started.
Sure. So your first role in Salesforce, would that have been more like an admin role or a product owner role? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I was kind of, I would say that probably the closest description would be product owner role at the time. Yeah.
Sure. And then you moved into consulting. So you've been a product owner, a consultant. What have the roles looked like since kind of making that break and moving into consulting?
Yeah, so in the consulting space, so obviously I was working for a couple of different consultancies in London, and it was very hands-on role. So I was doing all the way the configuration and implementations and production deployments, so very hands-on. And then slowly it moved more to the kind of senior consulting roles. And obviously after that, I came to Australia back in 2014, and one of the I would say one of the most important roles for me to grow as a professional was when I was the Salesforce platform lead, managing quite a few Salesforce instances. And then after that, I was fortunate enough to be offered a job at National Australia Bank as a manager engineer, and I've been there now for 2.5 years.
Yeah, sure. So I think the transition you've made from obviously end user into consulting, you did a number of years in consulting and have gone back into the end user world. So I think that's interesting because a lot of people look to go the other way and get into consulting. And then, so what is it you really like about working for the customer?
Yeah, so I guess if I think about the consulting roles, I was young and I was very excited about the changing projects and always new things to learn, new clients, changing industry landscape. I think that's the benefit you get because you're working with so many different industries. You're also getting exposed to many Salesforce products. Every implementation is different. So you kind of get to learn a lot wider set of products, I would say, as a consultant. But then on the other hand, what I love working as a kind of end user is that you really see how the product transitions to production and people are using it and getting that feedback from the users. Some people don't like the BAU factor. They find that actually a bit like intimidating and boring, but I do love it because it's lovely to see the hard work that you've done actually being in production.
Sure. And have you found that the roles that you've been in, where you've been the product owner or platform lead or platform manager, have they been quite heavy on projects? And has that been important? You are involved in the BAU, but do you think it's important to find a role where you still get to drive projects and see it through from, you know, the idea through to then that it's kind of your baby because you've driven that?
Yes, I do enjoy that. And obviously in my current job, that's one thing that I really enjoy is to see that big, hard program work to slowly move to production and ship new features there and see how they're actually living there. So yes, that's the best part of the work in an end user.
Sure.
Obviously, as a consultant, you get that as well, but you quite often had that set fix, statement of work, and then you usually move on to a next client after the project finishes.
Yeah, sure. So you've gone from being a consultant to making the strategic decisions behind a platform, but you've also taken on management responsibility of teams. How did you find that progression to being responsible for the team, and was that natural to you?
Well, I love being a people leader. I guess as a consultant, you sort of, how would I describe? You kind of have that set of deliverables that you quite often are brought to deliver. So you're quite like deliverable focused for what you're trying to achieve and really drive to complete those to get the results. But then in my current role, it has that people leader component that is really important, but it also has a lot of the core delivery and tech uplift and tech delivery areas that I need to cover as well. And I guess from the people leader perspective, what I enjoy the most is obviously working with people, but I love setting the vision. I think vision is very important for people. People enjoy when they understand the purpose. And the other thing is clarity. As a people leader, I really want to have a clarity and vision for my team so that I can keep them motivated. So I would say those are the things that are the biggest, I would say, differences when you're just delivering the project, whether as a consultant or as a sort of developer or as a team member versus, when you're really managing the team or leading the team, you really need to set the vision and the clarity for them, what they are there to do.
Sure. And how did you learn to be a good manager then? Like, is that something, do you like, are you reading a lot? Like, have you got a mentor that's helped with that journey? Like, how do you approach that when you perhaps hadn't managed big teams before, when you're moving into managing a large team?
I think it's a combination of everything. I tend to read a lot. I enjoy reading books that are related to, agile delivery or people leadership. But obviously, reading a book doesn't mean that you can implement those things in real life. So then I trial something. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, that's one part of it. I would say having good people leaders for yourself, that's a key thing. And I think I've been very fortunate enough in many of my jobs to have an extremely experienced and a good people leader who can help, and I can bounce ideas and get some help, and obviously mentors as well. So I tend to network a lot. So yeah, you end up kind of bouncing ideas with the people that you feel can actually help you out with certain situations.
Yeah, because I think if you don't have that approach, it can be quite a lonely place, leadership. If you don't look outside the immediate team and the people around you, I think you kind of need to have someone to bounce ideas off.
Yes.
So looking at your team, what do you feel are the kind of core components of a really strong Salesforce team, and how have you approached building a diverse group in the team that you now manage?
Yeah, like you said, so diversity, I think, is the key because people from different backgrounds, they really tend to bring the different set of eyes and brains into the delivery. And obviously NAV, as my current employer, is driving diversity at the workplace. And personally, I've been working really hard to get, for example, gender ratio in the team more gender balanced. And I really loved Mark Benioff's recent book, That Trailblazer, because he was mentioning in the book that when you're recruiting, to actually find a matching female candidate is hard work, and you need to work a lot harder. And I think software development is definitely one of those fields where you need to work harder to find the matching female candidates. And that's why I'm quite proud that at the moment, from my permanent team members, over 50% are female. It has taken me 2 years to get there, and I've been needing to use creative and different kind of recruitment methods to get there. But at the moment, I'm really proud to see that actually happening. And in addition to kind of having that high performing team, now I have also that gender ratio that is quite unusual compared to many tech teams around. And then yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like that to have over 50% is very, very rare. We would rarely see that, and I know that's something you're passionate about, and yeah, some of your posts on LinkedIn that I've seen in the past have kind of pushed that message, and I think it's one that needs pushing further. So that's great that you guys have achieved that. So you're an Agile professional. And Agile is a very, it's always a hot topic, and it's been a hot topic for years, I think, in in the IT world, but in the Salesforce world as well, most definitely right now. So as an Agile professional, do you see that most companies follow Agile properly?
I think that's the good question. Like, what's kind of proper Agile? I think people can't really put it into this box and say this is proper Agile. What I would say that I guess Agile just you need to adjust when you're using Agile in your key delivery. You just need to adjust a lot, and it works differently in different environments. And what works in one place cannot be really copied to another, as it was. And I would say maybe it's easier to pick the typical failures. I would say that one of the typical failures that I tend to see is enforcing too many processes into that Agile delivery and trying to get the whole organization, let's say, to work in the same Agile way, because it's continuous adjustment, it's continuous transformation, and sometimes the fixed ways of working and enforcing ceremonies is actually making people less productive. I guess it's the open mind. I would say there's a good recipe if you have an open mind, and if you bring like a result and object-driven thinking into every level of the delivery, I think that's when you're going to be very successful with your Agile delivery.
Sure. I think like when we speak to a candidate or we'll speak to someone, and like one of the key requirements to a new role that we might have might be that someone's worked in an Agile environment. And when we ask them, they say, yeah, we work in sprints. And I think that's what a lot of people like. That's to someone, what is Agile? It's like, oh, do you deliver in sprints, or are you not Waterfall? I guess it's not like, I think it's really identifying what Agile is, right? And then knowing how to deliver in that way is actually the important factor.
Yeah, and also measuring what really matters. So I really love the book that I read a while ago, which is about measuring what matters. And I think that's the key thing, is that when you start changing the ways of working, let's say you've been working very traditionally before and you move to Agile ways of working, it's very important to measure certain things so that you can say that actually we've been improving because X, Y, and Z. And that's something that people quite often forget, and then it's very hard to say if there's any difference or if Agile is actually working for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We in our survey, our annual survey, we asked the question to project managers. We asked, which method is best? And it's funny how many think Agile, so a mixture of both is the best path to go. But yeah, it's definitely a hot topic, and it doesn't seem to be going away. So it's just interesting to get your views on that. So as a collective, your team, it's quite big. It's quite high profile as well. You know, it's the work that's been going on within the businesses in the Salesforce ecosystem has been kind of well known. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges your team have faced over the last year or so, and how you've overcome them?
I think this is not a surprise to anyone. I would say latest challenge is obviously this COVID-19 situation. So suddenly going from working very closely as a collaborative team, face-to-face, in an office, in a very, I would say, quite mature Agile ways of working, and then suddenly being remotely on conference calls. It was quite daunting to start with, just to think about how are we actually going to continue to deliver efficiently and deliver value. But I would say we had a very good technology in place and great team spirit, and that really helped us to overcome that challenge. And I would say that we keep on continuing delivering value, and we keep on being even, I would say, more efficient than we were face-to-face, because people seem to drop off those, those face-to-face conversations that you tend to have in the office that are not quite that important. They get cut off, and you just contact people when you really need to. So I would say it actually has increased our efficiencies. Another thing that is, I would say, has been a big challenge if we go outside of the COVID situation is obviously being in a big program. And when you are finally delivering a big piece of work to production, how do you balance between the BAU and the core delivery? And you keep on delivering the value whilst you're actually supporting the production and a large user base. And I think one thing that we put in place, which seemed to have been working very well for us, is to roster developers into the BAU roster. So everyone gets exposure to the ongoing incidents and enhancements work, and they all will be also involved in the core delivery. And we roster people roughly every 6 sprints around. So that seemed to work really well. And that was a challenge to start with.
Was that a challenge in getting the developers to be open to doing that? Like, are they, because a lot of developers want to be kind of project focused and be building cool things. Was it hard to get them to see the value in doing that?
I think it was more about the idea, how can we make it work in a way, because so often you might not be finished with your core delivery, but then if that person then rosters to the BAU, how we manage that change. But it took us, I would say, 6 months to get there. And then finally that rostering started to work. So I would say that was the biggest challenge, is that how do we kind of transition the work that might be in flight to another developer if the other dev is then moving to a roster. So that's the kind of...
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So your first role was in an end customer, going way back to Salesforce, and you've progressively, I guess, gone into, when we look at your end user roles, you've gone from that to then your first product owner role in Melbourne to now the role that you have now. And I guess the user base that you've been supporting has progressively got bigger.
Yeah.
And I think the platform manager, product owner, that role can kind of mean different things to different people, because if you, like, we see some people that would call themselves a platform manager in a very small user base environment where they're really an admin and they're supporting the users, but because they own the product, they are a product owner in sorts. But what's the difference when you're going through the user bases as a product owner? What's the difference, I guess, in complexity or the considerations you need to have between an enterprise product owner like you are to maybe being more of a senior admin that looks after a small outfit?
So I guess to correct a little bit, so in my current role, I kind of, we have separate product owners who are actually managing the business side of the requirements. And then as a manager engineer, we actually manage more of the delivery and the technology side of the product. So that's how we kind of separate those items. So I would say from the user base perspective, a smaller organization is always easier, because you usually know most of the end users and you easily get the feedback. I would say the biggest challenge in a large user base is to get a true feeling. How do you measure the true user satisfaction? How do you measure the, kind of the NPS of your platform? How happy are they to use your platform? And also get that feedback loop in terms of when they're using it to what could we do better. So I would say that's the biggest challenge, and that's why we have a great setup in place, that we have product owners who are engaging with the business that help us as a tech team understand what are the problems or what are the enhancements that we need to be focusing on, and then we prioritize those and work on those.
Sure. And looking at like project delivery, so we've touched on Agile and a few different components of how you've been successful in this role. But if there was another company out there that were just about to start a big Salesforce project, what would you say the key foundations are to ensure successful delivery?
Clarity and vision. Because like I said before, I think human beings in any role, they just drive from the purpose. So I think even if you have the best tech team in the world and they just do not know what they're delivering and to whom, it just doesn't mean anything. So I would say, like I mentioned in the previous question, I think product ownership is the key, product management, because they can set you the vision and they can really help you to understand what you're building. And when you then combine that with a very capable tech team, you can really build that vision that the product owners are picturing.
Sure. And what about from the stakeholder side then, in terms of getting behind that vision? Is that something they're also part of, right? Setting that vision alongside the product
Yes.
owner?
So I would say that that's a really big combination of business and technology and product ownership to work together. And that's, I would say, is the hardest part always. And to get everyone on the same page and have that clarity and vision together.
Yeah, nice. Okay. And let's look at forward thinking a little, and the Salesforce platform. It's evolved a lot since you moved into this space back in London. What areas of Salesforce really excite you right now and moving forward?
I think it's always changing, because Salesforce platform tends to change very frequently. But at the moment, I would say analytics. I think it's interesting that almost 10 years ago, when I started working in Salesforce ecosystem, one of the most amazing things that end user love was reporting, because they were used to those Excel reports, that were always out of date and exported data from multiple systems combined, and then it was 2 weeks old and it meant nothing for them. And then when they had got their hands into Salesforce platform and were able to just run real-time reports, that was amazing. But now when we look at that and compare what, for example, the latest product, Einstein Analytics, is bringing into that equation is incredible. And I think if you look at all the publications in the tech space, data is everything. And most companies, especially those companies who have good quality data and can analyze it, are a million miles ahead. And I think Einstein Analytics is one of those products that is quite exciting, because especially if you're a medium-sized company that you don't have all the resources available and all the different analytics tools, but you really still want to get powerful analytics, I think Einstein Analytics is one of those quite exciting products in Salesforce world. The other thing that I'm also very excited about is to just see that even during these 10 years, Salesforce is continuously reinventing and transforming. It's not staying where it was. It's always changing. New features are coming out, new products are coming out, new acquisitions are happening. That's exciting. And I would say the third thing that is very exciting is it's moving more and more configurable approach, which allows then many other people who are coming from other technologies to move into the Salesforce space and really upskill themselves and become Salesforce professionals.
Yeah. I mean, there's no kind of limit to the entry point now. There's the bar's getting low. I mean, the system's getting more complex, but the ability to get into the market is getting easier because of things like Trailhead. So yeah, I completely agree. So I've really enjoyed the chat. Lots of really interesting topics in there, and I think people are going to be interested in how you've delivered success in a complex environment with a big team. So I think people will probably want to reach out. What's the best way for them to contact you if they have any questions?
I would say LinkedIn. I'm there usually quite active, posting a lot. So yeah, feel free to connect.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciated it. And yeah, all the best for getting back into the office and continuing to deliver great results.
Thanks so much, Ben.